Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Today I wanted to continue a series looking at the 10 mechanics that got substantially increased Atlas support in patch 3.20. And these are all the mechanics you can block. So this is Heist, Metamorph, Delirium, and so on and so forth. Today we're going to be looking at Abyss, but I've got a video already up on Breach, link down in the description below. This is the minimal passive tree that takes all of the nodes. It has 24 travel points and 42 actual points that are Abyss themed. And I'll just quickly point out that we are taking a travel notable as well. That is Mad Devotion, just because it's on the way. Of course, if you are already on the east side of the tree, you're going to probably path in a different way to this. This is the optimal path if you have no existing points spent on your Atlas, but in practice you'll have a few points spent there from other mechanics. Let's firstly discuss the magnitude of the buffs and the identity of Abyss, because these buffs put Abyss into a different spot to where it was, particularly if you go back quite a while before we had Atlas passive trees at all. Back then, Abyss was mostly about a couple of specific items that could drop from it. The Stygian Vises, the Lich Uniques, and the like. There are 5 main rewards now from Abyss content. These are, firstly, your Abyssal Depths exclusive items. This is your Stygian Vises, your unique items, and the almost exclusively from Abyssal Depths, although I do believe that some of them can drop elsewhere, the unique Abyss Jewels like Tekrod's Gaze. Then the second category of rewards is Abyss Jewels. These can be crafting bases or they can be seen as already rolled items. The third category of rewards is item level 86 plus bases in the highest quantity that you can get them in the game. Now these are only available from Abyssal Depths, and primarily if you want to go this way you want Lightless Legion spec'd on the Atlas passive tree as well. This will mean that all the monsters in an Abyssal Depths in a tier 15 or higher map will drop at least item level 86 for every single drop that they have, and that's going to mean that you'll be flooded with things like item level 86 plus Val Regalias, Zodiac's Leathers, Assassin's Garbs, Sorcerer Boots, and the like. The fourth category of rewards is base Tileset drops. So here, it's just taking advantage of the fact that Abyss puts so many more monsters into a map, and this will cause those maps to have a lot more of any base Tileset drops. Divination cards like the Patient come up here. I'm just calling out the Patient as one example. This applies to any Divination card that can drop from any monster in a map, or even just core drop pull items like Raw Chaos Orbs. And finally, the fifth category of rewards from Abyss content is XP. Abyss is extraordinarily good for XP. It's up there with Heist as the best of the 10 blockable mechanics for XP, and it's possibly actually better than Heist is, especially with Abyssal Army being so good, and with polished and higher Abyss Scarabs offering so much extra XP as well. In short, Abysses indirectly add a lot of pack size to your maps, and that means you're getting more things from the core drop pool, and it means you're getting a lot of XP. A couple of quick notes on Abyss mechanics first. If it leads to an Abyssal Trove, it will path 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 times, and you can constrain this by taking some of the things up the top so that you get a bias towards getting higher numbers there. If it's going to lead straight to an Abyss Depths, it will only path once. It is also possible to fail an Abyss, although this doesn't happen much in practice. In order to succeed at an Abyss, i.e. to keep it moving on, you need to kill most of the monsters that are present within a time limit. This time limit is generous and generally won't come up unless your character dies while you're fighting the monsters, and having 1 Gigatank rare won't matter. If you have a fair few Gigatanky rares, then you might be in trouble, and at that point you might also be trying to run Abysses that are beyond your character's power at the moment. And finally, before we get into the nodes themselves, a Trade League note. If you are running a strategy that is based upon Abyssal Depths, one thing you want to do is sell your Stygian Vises, item level 86 plus ones, in bulk on the Forbidden Trove trade Discord, rather than individually. You'll be able to move them faster, and you'll be able to move more of them at a time. Save up until you've got 12 of them or so, then list them as a single bulk lot for 10C each. They'll sell instantly. Alternately, if you just post them on the trade side at 7C each, you'll be selling them one by one over time, and if you post them higher than 7C, you might not sell them at all. These prices are based on the time I'm recording this video. They may have changed by the time you're watching it, but generally speaking, a lot of 12 sold at once on TFT will get you 20 times as much as a single Stygian Vice sold, and it's in one trade, and so it's much better. Your other Trade League alternative, though, is just simply to buy Conqueror's Exalted Orbs, not Hunter's Exalts, but the other ones that are cheaper, Warlords, Redeemers, and Crusaders, and apply them to your Stygian Vices, and then randomize influence with Harvest until you get a Shaper, Elder, or Hunter belt. Elder and Hunter belts sell for quite a bit, Shaper belts sell for a fair bit less. I've made over 25 Divines in the last week doing this in the Trade League, but of course the more people that are doing it, the less currency it generates. Now, it's my present opinion that focusing on the in-map events is the best way to play Abyss at the moment, and that the Abyssal Depths are a bit of a sidetrack and not that big of a deal. That may change in future though, and if you do particularly like the Abyssal Depths gameplay, then by all means feel free to spec into those as well. In terms of pairing Abyss with other mechanics, Expedition and Breach are close on the passive tree, which means that it will reduce the amount of travel nodes you need to go to, but also they're synergistic in that they also put a bunch of extra monsters onto the map, and therefore they multiply with Divination Scarabs. Builds with Corpse Explosions in particular will love this combination. So let's go through the various clusters, starting with the Southeast Underground Kingdom cluster. So this is a pure Abyss chance cluster. This will give you 12% unconditional chance to have an Abyss in your map, and you'll also get Underground Kingdom, which on a 2-mod transmuted map will give you at least 4% more chance to gain an Abyss. On a 4-mod Elked map, it will give you at least 8% chance to contain an Abyss, and on an 8-mod map, it will typically give you 20% chance to contain an Abyss. This is not an extraordinarily good cluster, but it is something that is good enough that you should take it. Note that if you're forcing Abysses onto your map through the use of Abyss Scarabs, let's say that you're using a Rusted Abyss Scarab, which adds 1 Abyss to the map, then these Abyss chance nodes become a 4% chance to have a second Abyss in the map. So they will still give you full value in conjunction with any tier of Scarab. In short, take this on every Abyss setup, even though it's never extraordinarily good. Now, when you're wanting to level through Abysses, one thing I would recommend is actually making Underground Kingdom a little bit worse. And that's because one of the key things about leveling past 95 is that you want to minimize the chance of something going wrong. And the best way to do this is to reduce the number of map mods on the content you're running. Ultimately, XP doesn't scale all that much with map mods, and map mods scale a danger tremendously. As a result, you may actually get less value out of Underground Kingdom because you're probably just going to be transmute augmenting your maps to keep them as safe as possible. But even then, Underground Kingdom remains a node worth having. So yeah, take this cluster on all Abyss setups. Next we have the East Outer cluster. Now this is the Ancient Conflict one, which is the Scarab Sustained for Abysses. The small nodes here are 15% increased monsters between them. This is the reason you're going to be taking this cluster. Honestly, the notable here is take it or leave it. Ancient Conflict doesn't do all that much, but these 3 small nodes are so good that you definitely want to take this entire cluster anyway. Whether you take Ancient Conflict or not is neither here nor there. You want to take this cluster on all Abyss setups that are focused upon the in-map Abyss events, and it's completely optional on Abyssal Depths setups because it doesn't really play to the strengths of Abyssal Depths content. Next cluster is the Inner Center cluster, and this is an interesting one in that it has one of the best things on the entire Atlas passive tree, Abyssal Army. This is XP, this is increased monsters, but the numbers on it are so high that even if your strategy is focused around Abyssal Depths, Abyssal Army is still worth taking because you're going to get a lot of non-depths Abysses anyway, and this is going to make them all much better. Then you're getting all that extra XP out of it as well. This node is phenomenal. The small node leading up to it is extremely good as well, and this makes this cluster good. However, on the right-hand side, we have complete trash. We have Votive Hoard. Abyssal Troves in your maps have a 20% chance to drop a rare item with an Abyssal Socket. That Abyssal Socket will actually be a suffix on the item, and whilst it's something that can occasionally, on the right influence base, be a useful thing to have, you're not going to get that through Votive Hoard. You'll be getting item level 83 bases that will, generally speaking, be very, very badly rolled. As a result, I don't think there is any real point to taking Votive Hoard or the small node that leads up to it, which is the same thing, just with lower numbers. These nodes are taken purely for a bit of a laugh. They're not something that's strong at all, and I don't recommend taking them on any strategies, unless, as I say, you just want to have a little bit of fun with them and see what sort of weird and wonderful items you get from Votive Hoard. It will not be very good ones. Next we have the East Center cluster. So this is Lightless Legion, this is Awakened Depths, and this is the Abyssal Depths cluster. Now, if you're setting up a tree for in-map Abyss events, then only the first node here is useful to you. There's 4% chance to contain an Abyss, and honestly, that is skippable. But you can still take this cluster because you will still get some Abyssal Depths when you're running an in-map event-focused Atlas, and you may still want to run them anyway. Basically, if your attitude to an Abyssal Depths is, drat, I'm running straight past that, then you don't want to take this cluster. If your attitude is, yeah, I guess I'll do that, then you should take this cluster. Awakened Depths actually has a very slight counter synergy with the entire top of Atlas cluster, but it's so small that it doesn't really matter. And that's because anything that leads to an Abyssal Depths is only a 1-length Abyss, and as a result, that's counter synergistic with the top Atlas section, which is all about longer depths. So final word here, take this on Abyssal Depth strategies, skip it on in-map event strategies unless you're willing to just mess around and do the Abyssal Depths anyway, in which case, it's pretty harmless to take it. Now we have the Northeast cluster for Corrupted Gaze and Abyssal Jewels. This one's really interesting. If you are an optimist, then this cluster is weaker than you think it is. If you're a pessimist, this cluster is stronger than you think it is. 20% chance for this proc is high enough that you'll proc this often. Most of the jewels that you get from it will be bad, but a tiny minority won't be. All of the very best Abyss jewels that exist across an entire trade league will come from people who have Corrupted Gaze allocated. They will not be crafted. They'll be lucky drops from Corrupted Gaze Abyss maps. That's why this is useful. However, the vast majority of Corrupted Gaze procs will be rubbish. They'll actually be worse than if you didn't have Corrupted Gaze allocated. So, how are you with variants? If you like variants, allocate Corrupted Gaze and prepare to be sad most of the time, but occasionally really excited by what comes out of it. If, on the other hand, you're very variance averse, then give this one a miss. If you're playing in solo self-found, I would say that this is quite a bit worse there. One clarification I will make here is that when it says corrupted and have 5 or 6 random modifiers, some people interpret this to mean that it will have 4 explicit modifiers and 1 or 2 Vile corruption modifiers. This is incorrect. It will be 5 or 6 random modifiers from the normal pool, and there will be no corruption mods on it. And finally, we get to the new stuff. So everything we've discussed so far is things that were in the game previously, although some of the numbers have been buffed since last league. This entire cluster up the top is all focused about Abyss pack size. This is about flooding your maps with extra monsters. So this focuses on Abyss length and Abyss pack size. Every single node in this cluster is good, and every single node builds upon what came before it. So you have Abyss Chance, granting you more chances to get Abysses, quite a bit of that stat, and you want that. Then you have Reactive Swarm. Abysses in your map spawn 10% increased monsters for each prior pit in that Abyss. So this means that if you get an Abyss that travels 3 times, your first one will be normal, your second one will have 10% increased monsters, your third one will have 20%. If you get a 5-length Abyss, then it's going to be 0, 10, 20, 30, 40 for an average of 20% increased monsters. Because of its synergies with later things, this ends up being really good. It's not as good as Abyssal Army, but you're going to be taking both because they work so well together. Next, you have a percentage chance for Abyss Pits in your maps and Abyss Cracks to spawn increased monsters. This is a small chance. These nodes are not individually fantastic or anything, but they are travel nodes for a reason, and they're fine. They do something useful, they play into the strengths of the Abyss strategy, so you're fine to take them. They don't feel like a wasted node, but they are a travel node. We then get to Sustained Hoard. This one cuts off the 1-length and 2-length really disappointing Abysses. Notice how much better this makes Reactive Swarm. Not only this, but it also then gets upgraded later by Trail of Destruction, which also cuts off the possibility of getting 3-length Abysses. These 2 nodes are fantastic, absolutely amazing, and they're something that really makes Abyss work as for in-map events. Next, you get some quite good small nodes that grant you a chance to spawn additional rare monsters, chance to upgrade all of the normal monsters to magic, and you also have Darkness Rising for more chance to upgrade monsters to magic. This entire cluster is phenomenal if you're interested in just scaling raw number of monsters on a map and the raw number of base game drops that you're going to get. And that includes your Divination cards, so run this in a map that has good Divination cards and you will eventually be paid off for it. So basically, the purpose of Abyss is getting all that XP, getting all that global drops, and this new cluster plays really well to that strength as long as you've already taken the best node on the tree for Abyss, which is Abyssal Army. Like all of the other Abyss strategies, it is definitely a situation where the more points you invest into Abyss, the better each individual point gets, and you want to keep that in mind. If you've only got 15 points to spend, I'd probably recommend investing them into a different mechanic. Maybe, for instance, in that case, you take Remnants of the Past to get a chance of getting some Shaper maps, and also take Vivid Memories for a chance of getting Synthesis maps. These are things that stand alone. With Abyss, it is very much a case of you want to take the vast majority of these clusters. The only thing that I see as being completely optional is this cluster here, and this is probably expendable. You can drop these points if you have to, though I think that's going to feel painful. This cluster you can definitely drop. You can drop Corrupted Gaze if you must, but the rest of the tree is all essential. You definitely take the entirety of the North cluster. You definitely take Abyssal Army, and then you want Underground Kingdom as well. That's all I've got on Abyss for now. May your Varlorbs have interesting results, and I will see you around.